Welcome to the first YouTube live together with my friend Nicholas. Happy New Year for everyone. We're very happy to all those who have been watching our lives from last year. Now you're joining us to this year. And to start off the year, Nicholas, how was it for you? Just as we catch up and Instagram comes on, how was it for you? The holidays.
Yeah, maybe I can share something interesting about how I experienced the New Year day because
Yeah.
I'm now living in Bulgaria, which is in the western part of the world, let's say, and the West very much makes a huge deal out of the 31st of December passing into the 1st of January, and it's kind of the climax of excitement and noise and activity, let's say, right? But I
Yeah.
lived in the East, and particularly in Japan, and this very moment when you're passing from the 31st to the 1st is actually the quietest day of the year.
Mm.
And so I've lived through this day in two completely opposite ways. In Japan, the first, the second, and the third day of the year is essentially, you can think of it like the Christmas time for Christmas tradition in the West, in the sense that people will come together to eat together, family members travel from each other's houses and so on. And what they do is that at least in the past, now less and less and less so, but the housewife, so the housekeeper, the wife would prepare very traditional and particular foods for those 3 days, and then during those 3 days she would not cook at all and would just
Mm.
have these, basically foods that you didn't have to recook. Many of them had a lot of sugars or like different kinds of natural preservatives, whether with sugar or with pickle or with salt or with chili, and then it would just be a bowl of rice kind of thing. And so the first, the second, and the third day of the year is really family time, and it's this communion time. And Japanese in general are very quiet, but this
Mm.
period is extra quiet because not many people travel for business at all. Like all professions basically stop, and so people just travel between family members, and sometimes it's only 10 kilometers away or 5 kilometers away or 500 meters away. Sometimes it is 500 kilometers away, but travel of cars and transportation is very, very much reduced, and so during those 3 days is very quiet. On the night of the 31st, the temple will ring on these huge bells, with a big trunk, tree trunk. They will ring 100 gongs, not very quickly,
Okay.
like one every 3-4 minutes maybe. And so it takes actually 4 or 5 hours for the gongs to be completed. And these 100 gongs symbolize the 100 sins that the Buddha had pointed to. So, it's a very spiritual, contemplative time. People go on a pilgrimage at night. They maybe, leave the house at 11 and they arrive at the temple at midnight. They stay there, they do some prayer, they come back. And I've done that as well. So this contrast between the West sort of rising in excitement and and noise, and the spirit of the East, that where you quieten and quieten and quieten, is very strong, and I fall much more on this side than I fall on this side.
Mm.
So I have really no attachment to fireworks, to parties, to alcohol, and all of that. It doesn't do anything for me. Whereas the Eastern tradition really took me somewhere. Uh, so that's how my year began, with this sense of, I went to bed even before midnight and then had to wait until the firework noise quietened down and to go to sleep. So that's me. How about you?
Wow. I would say for me personally, I tried the fact that I was back at home, I wasn't in the city as usually when we meet. I was back at home, so it was quite also quite quiet. Um, some places that they have these fireworks, maybe some resorts at the far where they have these fireworks, some tourist resorts, but usually yes, it's a very quiet, intimate place. So I would understand the Eastern tradition of going within. At the end of it all, it's not of an explosion or an overflow, but really a centering and starting from the center going. And I think that's how
Can
I
you
perceive it.
can you clarify for the audience what you mean by a home?
Yes,
Precisely, geographically, culturally, there's so much
absolutely.
interesting stuff there.
What I can see. Yeah. So far, even when I came in, starting off the live, I record from the capital of Kenya, which is Nairobi. So it's the largest city. That's where I work and live. But when I say I go home, most of us go back to the countryside. So the countryside is where our cultural community, our tribes are. Like that's where our, our our origin, where we feel like the people that we usually are from, our community. Even though we have different communities, even in the city, but I think even I got to share with you that we understand that the interactions we have at the city are very transactional and superficial. So it's very hard to create that bond. At the shopkeeper, I talk to them because I need a transaction. Maybe the mailman, I need a transaction. Caretakers or something like that. Even colleagues for the most part. But when we go back to the countryside, where our fathers, grandfathers, and grandfathers' fathers were, and that's their land, we feel a sense of centeredness that we are back to like the origin of where it all started before we had to move to the cities to have this community, to have these opportunities to meet you, Nicholas, to meet our viewers, and we have some time at the end of the year to still go back and connect with who we are and center ourselves as a community, as as a tribe actually. So geographically, I would say it's almost 400 kilometers from the city. So it's at the very western end of the country, bordering our neighboring nation, where there's this large lake. Many, probably some of the geographical um, knowledgeable people will know it's this lake, Lake Victoria, which is believed or was believed earlier that the explorers believed that it was the source of the Nile. So that's where I would say
Is
my
it the source of the Nile or not?
it is for the most part. It is believed to be the source of the Nile for the most part. So it really runs from the lake all the way up to Egypt, really. So that lake is around the shores of that lake, and the land around that lake is where I feel, or we have already. That's why we call home. So most of the time, and not just myself, most of the people who reside in the city go back at the end of the year to recenter themselves. It's a very long trip for some. Some it is shorter, some it's longer. But on average, most people spend about 5-6 hours. And that journey for all of us, we find it as very um, insignificant. It's very important. Even as you're talking about the pilgrimage they make at midnight, I can imagine it's quite inconvenient for some to walk around out at midnight. It probably is not the warmest weather, probably it's not most late point, but they still do it because it's significant for them. And I totally understand whereby when you have to move from the usual place, the usual possibly noises, the usual areas, the usual business meetings, the places where you conduct all these things, and go back to a centering point where you start off the year, whereby when I'm starting off a new year, I feel centered, I feel connected with my community. So that's how I
And Rene,
experience
I know
home.
that I was talking to you over this period, and you
Yeah.
mentioned the name of your community as Luok.
Yes.
Do I pronounce
Yes.
it correct? Can you tell us a little bit
Yes.
more? What does Luok tribe mean? Like even at a basic factual level, because I see that when
Absolutely.
you're speaking, you are using the we and
Yeah.
our very naturally and very often. So you don't say my community or my tribe, you say our community.
Yeah.
You don't realize probably, but that's what you've been using. So even your sense of communities is that sense lives in you as a shared sense of community, not as
Mm,
your sense of this community, right? So that you're not outside looking in, you are inside looking in. And
mm.
I want to know more about.
Thank you. Thank you actually for asking that. So it's actually it has come. We come from different names, but in the Kenya, it's called the Luo, Luo, Luo tribe. For Luak is actually for the neighboring country. So our fellow tribesmen, but from the neighboring country, because when there was whole we created all these borders for these nations, the same tribe that used to live together, when the borders and the nation borders were created, it didn't consider that. So there are segments of
Oh,
different tribes that were put in
and what
different.
is the neighboring country?
Uganda. The neighboring country is Uganda, and then above us is Ethiopia. I think maybe some of them have heard of that country, Ethiopia. So that country is actually landlocked, other than the lake. So the Luo tribe actually is, we are believed to be first Nilots. So Nilots are, it's a category of people who have always believed that they resided along the Nile. Our way of life and our sustenance and our growth was sustained through the Nile. So normally we were fishermen, we were agriculturalists, uh, and that was where our sustenance was. That's where our built our community and our civilization, so to speak. So most of us we believe that we started from Sudan, which is just below Egypt. So I don't know if we started in Egypt, but what we know for sure that we started in Sudan, because most of the Sudanese also have similar features to us to this day. So we started off in Sudan and we migrated downwards as we were growing in population, also as we were following this river of sustenance. I think it maybe is even natural that when people get to grow out of a certain space, they feel that we know we need to get more space. Some factions decide to leave, some decide to stay. So all this happened over across, I think, hundreds of years. So by the time maybe other explorers found us, or the rest of the world found us, whether the Asians, whether the Indians, whether the Europeans, there were these different factions, but they were still rooted to I would say, an central origin, which is along the Nile, in the Sudan. So this community has grown in each nation that they have been. So right now, even as I mentioned to you during the holidays, the Kenyan population is about 7 million right now as we speak. The last census, which was I think 2 years ago, in the year 2022, it was 7 million of this Luo tribe that is here. So we all speak a common language, so far, but it is similar to I would say, our neighboring or our brother tribes in other nations. The pronunciation might be different, but we all have a certain understanding. So I would say that's mainly of our community, and we usually reside all around the Lake Victoria region, the shores of that region.
In
There's
different
not, yes, in different countries. So the
yeah,
lake
because
actually,
we need to wrap ourselves around the fact that nation states are a relatively new invention in history.
yeah,
Only were born a century, maximum 2 centuries ago, or 2.5 centuries ago now. So yeah, very relatively recent. And so the world was not divided as we describe it today. The Lake Victoria region was just what it was. Uh,
exactly. In fact, even the country that I live in is, we're just turning 65 years. The nation
right,
of Kenya is
right.
65 years old. Like you said, it's just
Well,
the,
Italy, who people think is very, very old, your nation is 175 years
mm.
old.
So I can imagine that in the same way, you might have had some of these tribes that decided to come together and establish this nation state, or some leaders decided for their
Yeah.
own benefit going forward that certain boundaries were had to be cut out. So it's the same thing with Kenya, whereby as these borders were established, some factions of these different tribes were all over the Lake Victoria region. So that's where we usually are populated around. There's none of us who can see that we migrated to the capital of Nairobi, which is quite a highland. We've never been highland people. Um, there are those who have been highland people. That's more a different category of African people called known as the Bantus, who are more of the highlands. We are usually more of the very lower sea
And,
level people.
and you are saying highlands, right?
Yeah,
not island, as in an
yeah,
island.
highland. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. The
yeah,
highlands.
yeah, higher altitudes.
Nairobi, high altitude land,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Nairobi sits at 1,000 and
1,000, I think 1,700. I think I'll have to look it up. But 1,007. So it's relatively one of the cooler regions in the country. Other
uh,
areas are usually much, much warmer. This is usually, I think, the cooler region of the country because it's the higher up. And I think even as we had other foreigners coming in, whether the British, that's why most of them got to reside around this area because I think it could have been very similar to the European or the London weather, whereby it wasn't too hot, and also it was a bit more, regulated with temperatures. Sometimes it goes to 23, 21. It's tropical, it's equatorial, but it's not too hot. So
I want to come back to the community so do you have a double identity then, as a Kenyan and then as a Luok? How do you differentiate that, or is it a one identity that whose root and origin is in the Luok and you're just Kenyan? How do you manage that?
that's a good question. I would say, from how I feel, is that I am Kenyan because I am Luo. So when I mention Kenya, I mention it even though it's a relatively new identity that was established. I feel the fact that I am Luo means I am Kenyan. So I wouldn't say I would say it's an identity that is
Built on top.
codependent, yes, and it's built on top of that. That's what qualifies me to be
Would you
here.
say that that's the general sentiment of most Luo people that
Absolutely. I would say so, absolutely. Because they feel that as a community, we still have our own contributions to the nation, whether professionally, whether in some government positions, whether it's, um, yeah, even taxpaying, just general corporately. We find that the same responsibility we feel towards each other, we also feel towards the state. Because even though our language, I would say, is not the national language, so it's not synonymous, because realistically, if it was the national language, it would have been synonymous that Luo is Kenyan, but it's not. It's Swahili. So
sure.
Swahili is more, so we just feel that we contribute to this melting pot that makes Kenya, or together with the other 44 tribes that are here.
African
Yeah,
tribes, but also
yeah, 44 African tribes.
Indian.
Yeah, that now, yeah, that now all come together makes the population of 58 million Kenyans in total.
44 tribes for 58
Yeah,
million. So, but
yeah.
obviously, then all the other tribes have a much, much smaller count.
Some larger, some smaller, because as it stands now, I think we're the fourth or fifth largest. There are others that are larger, the others that are smaller. So I think we are among the top five. I think we're number five now. There are four others which are larger, which
Because
have
again,
grown
not
high.
all the Luo people live in Kenya. Some of the Luo people live in Sudan. Some of the Luo people
Yeah,
live in Ethiopia.
yeah.
Uh, so let's come back to the New Year Eve. How? So you are going back to family. You understand this sort of going in. You said, I loved how you used that going in aspect that I was describing in the East. What happens then on those days for you? Because I know you went back with quite a lot of family members. Like the
Yeah,
actual trip of going back was done with
yeah,
10 other family members.
yeah. I think I think I mentioned we're about 15. I'm traveling, so we found there also finding some there, finding an extra maybe 9. So together we were maybe 24, and that wasn't just all of us, I would say, depending how you mean family members. Like extended can be as extended as is, because also the fact that um, our lifestyle as culturally as Africans, whereby there's some things that are phasing out, but the consequence or the effects of them are still there. Like my great grandfather was polygamous; he had 4 wives. So if we included every part of that branching out of that family tree, that would have been easily over 100 people. My grandfather had one, and my father has one. But if we're going to go further, polygamy was a big thing. That people had multiple wives. That's why multiple households. So the family tree can be very extended in that way. But so far, when you're just considering my grandfather and my father, the family were about 20, 25 to almost 30. So on New Year's, we actually came together in the evening and almost had like a bonfire situation whereby we ate, we go to community, we go to fellowship. And how our homestead is that usually there's a main homestead, like that's for the main grandfather, the patriarch of the house. Then there are other mini houses around him. So that is for his sons and his wives. So many of them usually come to the main house for such very significant times. So even that's I don't know how you can say a homestead, but I think it's just self-explanatory, like an estate for those who might not have not encountered something like a homestead before, like an a housing arrangement that the patriarch of the house usually has the middle house, and the other houses for your sons, for your daughters are around, mainly for your sons, because the daughters we believe are will be wives for other men who have their own houses. So there are houses around, and we all come from each individual house to now fellowship in the main grandfather's house. So that is like considering and honoring the source of the family. Like everyone came from that union of my grandfather and my grandmother, then their children, then us. So this significant event that we had on New Year's Eve, we had a bonfire around outside there. We got to have some goat meat, I think barbecue, roasted. We grilled it. Uh, Interestingly, my grandfather has always been a creative. So this traditional instrument we have that is similar to a banjo or a violin. It's a string instrument. So he loved to play it. So he was playing it, and he also knows how to play the guitar. So most of our traditional instruments, as that now I'm speaking as a Luo, are string instrument and also wind instruments when it comes to the flute or the harmonica. Even our traditional music, you can hear those particular instruments and those percussions. So he likes to play that, and he got to play that, and we just got to communion, fellowship together, and eat and have a great time up until New Year's, up until midnight.
And did you have a countdown as is traditionally done here?
Um, did you have a countdown? Not really. It's not one of the things that we set a timer and see 5, 4, 3. We just know, generally, since we have watches, we just know, oh, it's up to midnight. Then I think up until 1, we continue with the celebration. Then it broke off. But ideally, a countdown. No, actually, we don't have that. I think when we're in that moment, we feel um the next minutes will still be here. Like this is like time has, how can I say it? Time has almost stood still. So this moment is ours, and however anyone else might communicate it, whether it's New Year's, whether it's 2024, 2025, it's still ours. So just moment of togetherness is that you are here with me and I'm here with you. However the clock says, whether it's a minute left or a minute left to do what, to just share this moment. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that we believe. As far as for all my years that we have had that fellowship every end of the year, we have never had a countdown really of getting to that last 000.
Yeah, what you're saying here is that what you're doing corresponds to some degree to the Western celebration of New Year Eve, but what you're really celebrating is communion and family and
Yeah.
tradition and pride. And
Yeah.
so time, and this is a notion that I hope our viewers can appreciate as being novel for most of us. Time is measured in the quality of the relationships that you are having. Quality is measured in the sense of communion and Ubuntu that is being generated by all these people coming together. And as you said, there is a process of traveling towards this moment. So by the, it is a climax, but it's a climax of connection, of human connection. Whereas when you perhaps more clinically look at what the climax of the Western mindset is, well, first of all, it's very centered on excitement. And I'm not sure that excitement can describe very well connection between others. Like, okay, yeah, we can go on an adventure together, we can go kayaking, we can go, skydiving and do these things together. And we feel this adrenaline and sort of mutual dopamine. I remember once I went paragliding with somebody, and when we landed, I was like jumping up and down because I had so much adrenaline and dopamine out of doing that. I never forget the person that I did that with. I was extremely grateful. So I'm sure people can come together with excitement, but excitement doesn't last. That's the problem. Excitement doesn't really last. Excitement in life is like sugar. It's this very sweet spot of life, let's say. So because it does not last, I would speculate that the impact of that connection also does not last. And I think if I think theoretically like this and then look at actually the experiences and the things that I've seen in the Western context, then I would say that's very true. That the connections that we make and New Year's Eve are usually very novel. They're not really family oriented. And there's a lot of partying, and so a lot of new and people come together and strangers come to them. What kind of connection can you establish with strangers? Yeah, you're there to mutually make noise and be excited. What does it leave after that, right? So the centerpiece, I think, of that moment is the emotion of excitement. What happens mentally? Well, I'm going to speculate again because, of course, everyone is different, but I think mentally we are coming out of ourselves, not into ourselves. In part because of the simulation of strangers, which takes us out, not in a calm place. It activates our sympathetic nervous system, our fight and flight response, rather than the relaxation parasympathetic response in us. And also because simply, how do you deal with that kind of novelty? How do you deal with that? I mean, there are, big noises happening all around you. People are moving fast and abruptly. And, there are lots. One of the things that you'll have in these societies is people throw little fireworks at each other, like suddenly to shock one another, sort of, in a way, so and it becomes dangerous, and there are many people dying out of this. Like literally every new year, we cannot avoid having different people dying from this. So that's the level of, it's not just excitement, sometimes it's even shock. And so I would imagine that the sympathetic nervous system response, the fight and flight, is more activated than the parasympathetic one. There's less connection, there's more adrenaline, there's more sort of excitement, and then strangers and celebration of novelty and fight and flight. And then the issue of time, I think I've discussed this with you before. In the context of Western society, the issue of time comes down to transactional relationships. Yeah. How do we measure the value of this relationship? oh, because we have exchanged these goods in this amount of time. The more goods and material goods we exchange in the shortest amount of time, the more efficient we are, the more worthy we are. Right? So and that please, I would love the audience to correct me if there is anybody here, you know, like listening. Please put your questions in the chat. But if you mix this time sort of attitude to the kind of emotions and thoughts that are going on, it makes a lot of sense that you're trying to squeeze in those few seconds 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. You see how even my energy mounts right now, right? It's like 10, 9, 8. You try to shout more and more and more to get to this one. So you're trying to squeeze the highest amount of energy in the shortest amount of time. That's the, I think, okay, I'm not, of course, that's just my view, my opinion. Don't take what I'm saying as, you know, an absolute. I'm certainly very passionate when I make an argument, but it doesn't mean that I'm more, you know, true or realistic about things than anybody else. But I'm reflecting, and I'm trying to reflect more deeply and widely about, you know, what I've seen over the past 50 years. I'm going to become 50 this year. So so that's what I see. And yeah, what would you say excitement plays into the circumstance that you have described? What would you say is the foundational emotion of that moment of passing from one year to the other, where you're not even looking at the clock, you're sort of vaguely aware what is actually happening for you over that passing over? Are you looking at the fire? Are you dancing together? Are you chatting with somebody? What are most people doing in that moment?
I think most people, there's music, so people are dancing, people are enjoying, people are sharing. So as we cross over the main, I would say one of the main feelings and what's happening in the moment is a sense of sharing, a sense of warming each other, a sense of making sure everyone is warm, everyone feels connected, everyone feels warm as we get into this new year. So even as you are talking about being shocked and the fireworks, and I've seen so many times whereby right now it's a competition for different countries for who has the bigger fireworks. So
Yes.
I'm thinking at that moment everyone is looking up instead of
Yeah.
looking at each other at this big spectacle, at this big spectacle, to feel that I was here to witness this grandiosity. But
Yes.
after a few seconds, the night is dark, the sky is black again.
Yes.
So it doesn't last. So I find that very, very curious that all these big cities in the West, you have so many people coming together, wanting to record, wanting to look up and see these big manifestations, this big, opulence of we are here, or more feels like I arrived. I arrived into 2024, 25. Doesn't matter if my
I
people
I
around
am
me.
missing this.
Yes, I am
And also I'm
witnessing it.
thinking of, it's almost like we're trying to trigger this emotion of awe. You know, do you know
Mm,
awe is like this sense of that something is bigger than yourself, you know, that you're looking
mm,
up, almost as if it was like a secular version of Christianity, you know,
mm,
bringing the cross and Jesus through the street or something like this. Perhaps what we're trying to create is this sense that there is something bigger than us. But
mm,
it's true that when we witness that event, not only doesn't last, but also we are witnessing it alone. We're witnessing it, you
mm,
know, just individually. We're not in that moment. We are not really sharing with one another. We may feel, you know, we are part of a crowd. I've been in places where I was part of a crowd, like this in Sydney, for example, watching the fireworks all over the bridge. Honestly, I will be very honest with you right now, not because, yeah, sometimes I may be kind of very critical about the Western, you know, mindset and so on. But in all honesty, while I remember being there, and I remember a sense of a vague sort of crowd around me, of not having been alone. That would be an absolute exaggeration if I said I felt like I was alone. I felt a massive crowd of strangers were there to witness something together, right? So maybe that's warming in a way, that warms up the heart, right? You witness this very ephemeral event together, so that makes it more real, right? Because if something lasts 10 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes, like sometimes we have amazing cloud events, right? Like a cloud looking like a dragon or something, or you know, the sunshine coming through the snow and making these kind of rings or something, like something ephemeral like that. And if you have a whole crowd witnessing that, it creates a sense of bonding and togetherness, I would imagine. And you know, even if you look into the history of African tribal rituals and so on, there are moments in which different tribes all around the world, not just in Africa, will come together and create a huge bonfire and maybe sacrifice animals and things, you know, like sort of
Yeah.
the creation of a moment that is ephemeral is there for the Westerner as well. Um, did did that allow me to become someone more connected in my life? Obviously not, because how can I connect to all those strangers, right? Like nothing is like you, Rene. You are 29 this year, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yes.
you Rene, at 29, every year you continue to nurture this sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself, you know, belonging to a historical lineage and so on. At your age, year by year, I was celebrating these moments with strangers. Either I was working as a waiter to make the most amount of money on that night, because that's the best place that you would get, you know, hotel or whatever you do it, you know, in that night, you earn more. So professionally, so no connection there really. Or with parties and strangers, so again, no real connection. I really literally remember zero people out of those parties. So, you know, we need to take that into account as well. Yes, maybe we come together. Yes, maybe we witness something beautiful together. But what is, like, where is the collective memory of that? Besides an idea of being there that lives in you and that you cannot recognize in anybody else around you. Because after we disperse, who are you ever going to be able to share that which you saw in that moment? That's a big difference there as well, you know. It's like this, all of these individuals will just disperse again. There are no threads left to them. No, there are no threads. That's obviously in realistic terms, that's an exaggeration. There are threads left, but you cannot pull back any thread and find someone unless you were with a friend, or maybe you were there with 4 or 5 friends. I'm trying to think with you again. I you know, because the next year those 4 or 5 friends will try to do different things, will try to celebrate with different friends. They will not come together again. It's very rare. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard anybody saying, you know, every year I go together with my friends in this place. Now in Italy, for example, when I was very young and little, I think we were celebrating this moment at my uncle's place. So the Christmas we would celebrate it like in this, let's say my grandmother's place, and then the New Year's Year at my uncle's place, and there was food being prepared, you know, around the celebration, and we would watch. So there was actually family involved. So I need to be careful here that when I say what I'm saying, I actually mostly speaking about the Anglo-Saxon cultures.
Yeah.
You know, the more industrialist, the more individualistic, the more transactional kind of cultures of our world: Australia, United States, Canada, England, Germany. Yeah, because the Latin part of Europe is already much more relational than
Mm.
transactional. Right? Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share and reflect on all of these details. I certainly feel enriched when I'm able to reflect in this way, and I hope our viewers are as well in participating in this conversation with their own thoughts about their own
Yeah.
communities and their own ways of celebrating. So coming back to the topic of New Year's resolution, how do you walk into, is even the idea of resolution sticking with you? Like, that does it matter? Have you ever practiced it? What,
Um,
does it emerge and come out of this moment of sharing? Because I also know that these moments of sharing that you did with your tribe and family in particular was extended into 4 or 5 days after,
mhm.
and what, about a week before,
Yeah.
right?
So I would say that, yeah, mainly from a week, maybe around the 20, just actually the 22nd is when we got to travel, and up until the 5th. So that it was, they were extended because ideally it's a whole season that we spend together, those 2 weeks. Ideally we spend together as a family. So when it comes to New Year's resolutions after that moment, ideally the conversations also happen, the conversations that happen afterwards when it comes to even goals of the family and what they expect to come in the new year. Interestingly, they're also somehow relational, because for me, I had conversations of, I haven't found a wife yet or a partner yet. And such people also have such situations whereby, as a family, are we growing? Are we bringing more people in? Is every one of us relationally where they're supposed to be? Even though, of course, that there are some times whereby they also mention about, professionally or career wise, if one person has certain access to certain, opportunities. But the main things, even as I've talked to my friends who are of different tribes, most of the matrix and the patriarchs think of, okay, as a family coming into this new year, how is the growth? Especially relationally, is everyone married? Like, marriage is a very big thing. Children is a very big thing. Is everyone fulfilling these responsibilities that we see to ourselves? There's some right now, even due to the constant industrialization, even how the Western world and the Anglo-Saxon world is creeping in as people are getting into different careers. There's that tension whereby the younger generation, like mine or my younger, are wondering, okay, I want to do this first before I get a family, I get a wife and children. But the expectations are still there. It's still a fundamental question whether it creates tension right now, maybe because they feel that they know more, and that they know, okay, I need to be a certain place, I need to reach a certain stability, but they feel that the relationship is the stability for them as a family. So even as we're coming into New Year's, and I have tried to have some New Year's resolution, mainly because of the education system, especially with schools whereby you had certain year of school, and I'm like, okay, I want to my grades to improve, or I want to do this and this and this. Also, maybe early in my career where I want to get an internship, or I want to grow this professionally. Even this year, I have maybe a few goals that I got to share with you that I want to grow, professionally. But so far, they haven't worked out as much because they're also very personal. And I feel that since I know it and I'm the only one who is accountable to it, I can change it. And maybe it's not that important sometimes, because we're wondering what is it for mainly. Sometimes you have to change the perspective of New Year's resolution. So far, it hasn't worked so much for me. I've heard there's so many common ones that people have for their health. They want to lose weight. I've had these running jokes that in this month the gyms are full to capacity because everyone wants to be in their best shape. But sometimes I feel it could be competitive, that they want to be in the best shape too. to compete with others that they look best compared to others, you know. But so far, for me personally, New Year's resolutions haven't worked as much because they have taken a very individualistic, maybe individualistic perspective that I'm really trying to understand. Should I approach them in a way that because they are important to me and they purely benefit me, and the achievement of these goals, does it help me to relate better with people, or does it make me feel like I am ahead of people? That as I'm turning 29, if I have these goals and I achieve these goals, will I be ahead of other 29-year-olds? Is that the goal? Or will I be able to still, you know, get to show up and fulfill the roles that ideally my family and my tribe want, which is, okay, this is the year. Do you want to find a wife? And because
It's
time
more
is ticking, do you want to find a wife? Do you
it's a
want to
more
find, yeah.
should you invest more of
So,
your intelligence, time, emotions into fulfilling a community goal rather than an individual
mm,
goal? Yeah, I don't,
yeah.
I, I can't say that I've ever had this dilemma in my
Mm,
life because, yeah, the issue of community, never appeared in my life. But I can say, like you, that New Year's resolutions have not worked for me at all.
mm,
Um, what there has been a shift for me in the last decade, and I think that works a lot better for me. And that is that I've shifted from an having's resolution to a being's resolution. That means I don't ask what do I
mm,
want to gain or have, even a new skill. I want to have the new skill of being able to do this and that, right? But it's more, who do I
mm,
want to be in the new year? How do I want to present myself?
mm,
For example, for myself, I'm working on being able to accept that it is okay to not know, even in the face of a public that might judge you harshly, like in this situation, right? Like that it's okay to be the Nicholas that doesn't know, like everybody else doesn't know, right? The universe.
mm,
So I'm trying to shed away this sort of um, expert sort of label to self or
mm,
personality. And that's a being goal. It's like something that I feel right now as I'm speaking to you. Am I speaking to you in a way that is as genuine as if I were alone with you, or not?
mm.
And what I'm cutting myself off or leaving out if I'm not. So that's a being goal, and that for me works a lot better, and something that perhaps I would encourage my viewers to think about. There is this beautiful book from Eric Fromm, a philosopher, psychologist. It's called Having or Being, something like that. But the fundamental question is
Mm,
about living life from a having perspective or living life from a being perspective. And I think that's what inspired me back
mm.
about 10 years ago to think about this dichotomy and to step into the new kind of resolution that I make.
Wow. I think that's a very something I've haven't had before. Being, when you decide to not just, it's not performative. It's not that I want to do this, I want to become this person. Is it is it a harder task, or how do you break it down? Does that mean that if you say, if you're going to bring an example, for example, is it I want to be fit? Does that sound bigger than I want to lose 10 kilos? Does that mean that you have to break it down to subtasks that you break down throughout the year, compared to saying I want to reach this figure?
Well, it's an interesting question to
How
ask
does that work?
because we know from research and science that we are much better able to create new habits if we have an identity involvement in those habits than if they are
Mm,
just like carrots that we want to eat, like external rewards.
mm,
If we can always start with I want to lose 10 kilos, and then we can say what does losing 10 kilos say about you? So in your case, for example, you might say, I want to lose 10 kilo. What does it say about you if you do lose 10 kilo? You can answer the question right now, and then I can guide you through the process.
Yeah, it says that someone who is more fit, it has more mobility, and is not as overweight. So it's someone who is disciplined to lose, and it takes discipline to
Okay,
lose. Yeah.
so just there, what you said is it's someone who is more fit. That's a quantifiable measure, right? More flexible. That's a quantifiable measure. But then you say it's someone who is disciplined. This is discipline, is being disciplined. This is the being part of losing 10 kilos. And so then the suggestion becomes focus on the being disciplined rather than losing 10 kilos. If you are disciplined with your food intake, the 10 kilos will go. Right? So you can start with an having goal, and you can translate that language to extract the being and then focus on the being. Yes.
That's a very good insight. So it really comes from an identity, whereby when we focus on the identity and we sit in this identity, so it's not really an extrinsic thing that there's 10 kilos there, that person is 10 kilos lighter, version of me that's 10, I need to get to that point, or I need to fit in these pants, or I need to fit in this shirt. It's more of, I need to be the kind of person who can say, who knows I don't need certain 4 meals a day, I don't need all these calories. Someone who operates in these different habits, so it's actually easier. And by the time you get into these habits, you will have achieved all this, that, oh, I wanted to fit in this shirt, I want to fit in these pants. And
yeah,
it's
you
already
know,
happened.
the issue of being disciplined, part of it is about the ability to say no at the right time, right? So whether you are able to say no to a demand that your boss is, you know, asking you, or no to yourself consuming more internet or Instagram or sugary things, you know, like the ability of saying no is very much attached to the ability of being disciplined. By the way, the word discipline for me, I translated into, and I don't think I've ever seen this on the internet, but the insight that I had in my life is that disciplined is profound self-compassion. And the reason why I say that is that the only way that you can build discipline in yourself is by starting in the place where you are not disciplined. Right? So if we take this, let's say I reach out for sugary things, right? I reach out for sugary things. The troublemaker is the person who is reaching out for sugary things, right? But if I don't understand the troublemaker, if I don't understand where he's coming from, if I don't empathize with this troublemaker, I will never be able to really acquire knowledge about what is happening. So how do I, like we have shown many times on this show, how do I step into the shoes of the thing that is creating the trouble, the alcoholic, the abuser, right? Like, how do I fend off from the abuser if I don't understand the abuser? How do I detach from an abusive relationship if I don't really understand how the abuser is getting inside me and getting me? So I need to find a profound sense of understanding of this troublemaker, let's say. Eventually the idea that this is a troublemaker disappears, because when you find compassion, you realize that this troublemaker is very much a part of you as the person that wants to become disciplined. Like, they're one and the same thing. So compassion allows also to break the divide between me and other. You know, just like I was saying before, you at the beginning, when you're speaking, you're saying we, our, us. You know, you become an us with yourself. So profound means deep. Compassion, for me, compassion is a form of knowledge, but it's a form of knowledge that is emotionally connected and layered, rather than sort of a clinical form of knowledge. And then from that base, you are then able to intervene much more finely into the process of reaching out for the piece of sugar or for whatever sugary thing it is, right? It's like, oh, I really feel you. Yes, wow, that would be so great to drink this thing. Look how beautiful it is. Feel how happy it would be to drink this. Feel the, like that excitement that we get, and that upward spike of happiness that we get in that moment. And then what happens? The ability to think about the future, like 5 minutes after you have consumed that thing, 1 hour after, 10 days after, is so now connected to the discourse of actually appreciating how beautiful this chocolate or orange juice is. There is no division in that discourse. And in fact, in life, that's what's happening. So discipline, profound self-compassion. And if we focus on this ability to say no, that ability to study yourself in your drives and how you move towards something and how you can move towards away from that something, this is an incredible skill that you can leverage across so many different fields of life, right? Many different situations. So I think coming back to the being root is a much more powerful approach to change than having sort of mentality. Again, having it's kind of very rooted in Western thought. Is a transactional way of going about interacting with yourself, right? Like, I'm going to say no to the sugar because so I can have a healthy body, so that I can look better, so I can attract more partners, right? Like, it's all happening on the having level of things.
And I really like that definition. I think many people, most of our viewers, should understand and get to maybe just digest and meditate on how this definition, profound self-compassion, that it's not that as you're holding the sugary thing, you're not hitting yourself, you're not slapping your arm that bad, you're being bad. No, you're seeing it, you're like, wow, yes, it will be great to have it, this Coca-Cola or whatever. And you're there, you're seeing, then okay, then now what? Now, after a few days, when that sugar rush passes, what are the effects of it? Will I be able to operate myself quickly? Will I be able to want to have something even more to add with that Coke? So getting to think, like you said, 5 minutes, 10 minutes after is something that is an approach that I think most people should start the year of. And I think for me, it helps me to understand that discipline, most people think discipline is pointing a finger at yourself or having that teacher that says you did this wrong, go again and do it again and repeat the task again and repeat the task again. And maybe they feel that certain gratification that they can punish themselves. If maybe when working out, the heavier it is, the more weight, the more pain they feel, the more like, oh, this is good for me. I should enjoy putting myself in this pain. I should enjoy, fasting, or, those who say that they're fasting, that enjoy cutting off every sugary thing and putting myself in that discomfort is a good thing. But that's not discipline. Discipline is getting to be compassionate with these feelings, not punishing myself for having those feelings, not punishing myself like, okay, I want an extra French fries or an extra Coke, and now I'm like, oh, this is wrong. I need to punish myself because I'm thinking and I'm having these cravings. I'm a bad person. It shouldn't be like that. And I think I've seen a lot of such mindset.
Yeah, you are dividing yourself when you do that, right? You're reaching out for the sugar. No, this should not be done. If we think about it, a parent doing that to a child, we know the effects are not going to be very good. But in that moment, really what you're doing is to enhance the split inside yourself, right? You're creating a divorce. You're cutting what you really want to do when you do that is cut your arm off, correct? If only I had no arms, I wouldn't be able to reach for the sugar and bring it to my mouth, right? In a sense, right? Taken to its extreme. So what you do, you enhance the split that is within yourself. as you say, some people really thrive through that split, in the sense that they will go to the gym and they will feel that giving themselves pain, they sort of establish this masochistic relationship with themselves, something that a lot of people come to therapy for later on. Because once you become sadomasochistic with yourself, how do you distinguish being sadomasochistic with yourself to being sadomasochistic with your child, with your wife, with your colleagues, right? When your identity is grounded in this logic, how do you interact with the other? The arm is the other, right, in me, but the arm of someone else is also the other, and someone else is also the other, an immigrant is also the other, right? People that don't work out their muscles are also the other. This other category broadens and becomes more and more bigger and bigger, and your attitude towards this other becomes more and more and more severe. That's what you're nurturing. You're nurturing an othering of the world. You're nurturing divorce, separation, splitting from the world. And you're nurturing anger and frustration and, yeah, essentially anger, maybe fear. Right? When I see my arm as being just an elongation of everything that is me, including not wanting to eat the chocolate and wanting to eat the chocolate, well, first of all, I'm nurturing a togetherness with. That means when my child is reaching out for sugar and he shouldn't, I am going to embrace this child and say, child, come here, you know, do you need more love and a warmer hug for me? You know, how are you trying to compensate for me not hugging you enough with that sugar, right? So there is this sense of bringing together.
Wow.
I mean, you know, like the world doesn't get any absolutely better because of people doing what I'm doing, or the people, you know, othering. I mean, it's not life changing or world changing, but qualitatively it does heighten the experience of presence and joy, and connection with others.
And it really gives more insight that even though it may work, like you said, that the sadomasochism could work for that year, that they actually do become more fit, but the consequence of it and and the effects in other spaces of their lives other than their self and in that context is something that need to be dealt with. If you're pushing yourself and you're putting pain on yourself, when your child wants to go to a certain field, or that you want to push them in a certain field, whether it's sports or something, you will now be you will show that brutality to
Sure,
them.
pain is
And
normal.
I've heard
Pain is
that
good.
some people,
Look at me, I
yeah,
look so good, right? Like, yes, you normalize. Well, at some level, you really have to normalize that you can't go into a gym and every time confront the moral dilemma of punishing yourself or being compassionate with yourself. You need somehow to normalize that behavior. It comes easier, you know. You need to get the exercise done. But I'll tell you, very much related to this exercise. And by the way, I noticed we have a viewer with us, and I would wholeheartedly, you know, encourage you to share with us some of your thoughts. There is a private chat on YouTube. Hopefully, it's there on Instagram as well. If you're on Instagram, you can go on the YouTube. The private chat is, the chat is open, I believe, Rene. So come up with
yeah,
some questions if you want to know certain things. But talking about this gym thing, the other day I went to what is called like a boot camp, a mini boot camp, which immediately gives off images of a militaristic sort of style environment. But actually, it was about 8-9 women, I think, age 45 plus, you know, up to 60, and then me and another guy, or yeah, I think so. It was mostly women being there, and then there was the trainer, and the whole training was basically cardio and weightlifting. So weightlifting, but in a more dynamic way, like maybe we are walking with some weights, or we want to get the heart basically beating, and the strengthening of the muscles. Now, I mentioned the women because, generally speaking, if you are doing a boot camp with a bunch of men, the exercises will be much, much harder, obviously, right? Because the base
Yeah.
rate for men lifting weights and so on is much higher, of course. So I was in a good place, okay, Rene? I wasn't in a very hard place. And yet, I get to do an exercise at some point. We had to kind of sort of position ourselves almost like a dog, but in the hands we had two weights, and in the position of the dog, and so you have to engage all these muscles of the back and the core here. You have to lift the weight and then put it down, and then you lift the other one. And in that moment, I felt such intense level of hatred for this activity. Like I could have killed the thing, and I don't know what would I have killed, but I wanted to kill the thing. And I knew what was happening. I knew what was happening because some 10 years ago, I was together with a new girl I'd met, and I was going out with her, and she had invited me to do some yoga in a park, but it was this kind of, what is it called? It's not called aerial yoga, but it's acro yoga. It's this way where you interact with another being to get into acrobatic positions, and it's just like a wow experience when you get to do even the most simple one, where like there is one person at the bottom holding your hands and holding you basically in an airplane position, as we say, and you see this happening with another person, and it's all very organic because the bodies are organic. So you're being held by this person. There's so much trust that you're investing, and it's all moving, but it's just amazing. I when I came off that position, it was like the paragliding experience I was telling you about, at the beginning. I was like so full of adrenaline and dopamine. I was laughing. Was brilliant. But some days later, I was at her place, and she's doing her morning routine, which is to do these stretches, like kind of a normal yoga routine. And I joined her. And at one point, I did this stretch, let's say when you bring the leg back and you're like this, and I felt this intense hatred. And I actually got angry in that moment with her and about something very, very trivial. And back then, I did not know how our bodies keep the score of trauma, how our bodies sort of use, how our minds use the body as a memory device. And so by stretching my muscle in that particular way, I was activating basically a trauma memory. I didn't know that at that time. But this time I knew it. So back then I reacted with anger and something really trivial, and we had a fight. It was really totally off for me to do that. But unfortunately, that's the nature of trauma. And that's how it happened. And this time I'm at the gym and I feel this intense hatred. I know what's happening. Something in my body is being liberated, is being opened, and I'm experiencing trauma, emotions related to trauma, maybe some deep grief or deep sadness. And so in that moment, I use the compassionate aspect of interacting with myself. I just slow down. For instead of pushing harder, I could have conquered that moment with pushing harder, right? Because what that does is it really does split yourself, and it brings the mind and the goal of doing this exercise up into the highlight and suppressing the emotion. I went the opposite way. I went, okay, what's going on? I slowed down. I said, we can get through this. It's okay. It's okay. You're safe. You're safe. It's okay. You can do it as slow as you want. Look, there's no hurry here. We are here. It's already beautiful. I thank you for being with me. I thank you for doing this. you're amazing, you know, I know it's hard, but we know that it's healthy. That's the point where things change. That's the point
Mm,
where things change. Why? Because when we are in the impulse of things, and obviously the hatred is an impulse event, we lose sight of long-term benefits and rewards. The
mm,
prefrontal cortex disengages, we go offline, and we become impulsive. So in this moment where the sentence comes, you know this is healthy for us, and suddenly the time, the value time, the time of the value of these activities stretching out to a month from now, cognition has re-engaged. So now I'm
mm,
fully there. Now I'm fully there, and I'm operating at my best, right? And I'm going through the exercise and so on. By the time I came back home, I had a hot shower. That day, I felt like Superman, you know. Of course, the time after, you know, I didn't want to go, resistance, but
yeah,
now I know better. I know, oh, probably you will go the second time. There is a good likelihood that you will
mm,
experience a lot of resistance again.
yeah,
Compassion. That's fine. That's okay. If we do experience it, we know what to do. Just slow it down. Be gentle.
mm,
I find this amazingly effective. Will
mm.
you find it effective? I don't know. But it's certainly less usual to hear this than to hear the other one, right?
Absolutely. And how you're able to take you through yourself through it, whereby you are projecting yourself to the future good of this activity, even though, and acknowledging that it's uncomfortable right now, and allowing yourself to take yourself through it slowly at your pace. No one is pushing you, no one is saying get more quickly. You just take yourself through it and centering yourself that as I'm doing this activity that I don't like, I'm guiding myself to a better version at the end of it. And when you're finished, I can imagine your thought process and your mentality that we did it. Um,
We did it, yes. Yes. It's the whole of me walking into the future rather than half of me. And I've
mm,
learned well too well that walking into the future with just half of you is very dangerous. Very dangerous.
mm, well, actually, I think this is a very fundamental question that we will bring in the new years. I hope even as our viewer, so far you haven't mentioned anything, but we thank you for actually coming in and continue to listen to this discussion and getting a fresh perspective compared to what others might do about pushing yourself, about exposing yourself to pain, and almost like you said, splitting yourself, that this is a good part of me that wants to go there. This is a bad part of me that wants to pull me back. So I can imagine if you let that anger continue to take over, you will have hated going back to that boot camp. You will have hated even the instructor. You will have hated the people around you who have a better time and seem to be enjoying it, because now everything will irritate you because of the dissociation that, look, these people are enjoying it, you're not, you're a bad person, you should be ashamed, or you should want to be like the trainer, you should be ashamed. And possibly even you might want to just never want to look at weights again. So
Poss-
it
Possibly, absolutely. That's why I say it's dangerous, because you fall into these extremes. And
mm,
possibly also the situation where you start to engage in a competitive aspect with yourself, and no, I need to be better than anyone. I need to best myself. So
mm,
you engage in this inner competitive, ongoingly inner competitive relationship with yourself, which eventually always leads to burnout and exhaustion,
mm,
and certainly hardly ever leads to feeling love in life,
mm.
because love is connection, not disconnection.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great thing. I don't know if you have much more to share on this subject.
No,
There's
we
so
can end
much.
here. I think it's a good note. Yeah, we've spoken of culture, and how how our mindsets are imbued and soaked in culture, and how that culture can influence us in very important manners. We have looked at the new year, we have looked at what a resolution looks like, we have looked at connection, and we have looked at how we could walk into this year with a fundamental choice about having or being and establishing disconnected relationship with ourselves and others, or connected relationship with ourselves and others. I think that's pretty sufficient for a first live this year. And Rene, we're going to have lots of new interviews
Yes.
coming up on this channel, so I really look
Oh,
forward to
yes.
that. I don't promise when they will be published, but we have a couple of potential interviews happening this month, and we are going to, you and I, invest a lot in this direction. So I really look
Yeah.
forward to that, and I hope our viewers also do.
All right, thank you so much, Nicholas, for joining me for this first live of the new year, introducing it and introducing our viewers that we will still be active. The channel will still be active. You can still, like we said, the ACE test, you can still take it from last year. For those who didn't get the opportunity to, you can still do. Still also supported by our coffee. Continue also, the website is still up in case you have any other inquiries that you might not want to put in the chat. Feel free to reach out on our website, De La Tierra Counseling, that it will be in the description. And thank you, Nicholas, and we shall speak soon with other guests and other conversations.
Bye bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone, and thank you very much to the viewer that was with us. Bye bye.